The film begins in the quiet town of Buck Lake, where we meet a young man named Benny, who works at the local supermarket Hastings Market. Benny is outside organizing the shopping carts, but he goes back inside the store and asks his manager Tarky for some alcohol to clean his hands. Tarky tells him to go to the checkout, where Lisa is ringing up the groceries for her stepfather, the police officer Steve. Everything seems like a peaceful evening until we see a group in a van making a recording and preparing to invade the market. Soon, a man enters and locks the market's doors, while the manager announces the store's closure. Benny is walking through the aisles until he meets a police officer named Hudson. The man asks for some information, and soon the young man tells him where to find what he is looking for. Benny fiddles a bit with the shelf and continues on his way until he finds one of his co-workers dead, and is soon surprised by two armed people. The other armed man already has a colleague hostage. The woman asks him to lie on the floor, and we return to the other kidnappers. One man is recording everything. The man with the camera realizes that Tarky is trying to call the police and quickly intercepts him, threatening him. However, the criminals seem not to want to steal anything. One of the men starts analyzing the customers, trying to find something, going from person to person, checking their minds. One of the men who seems to be the leader is named Ritter. He instructs the rest of the group to keep the hostages apart. Each one is in a different aisle being watched. One of them warns the rest to be careful, notifying them that they know they are there. The man checking the people is named Spooky, and when he is checking a woman, he seems to find what they are looking for. The woman tries to run, and Spooky alerts his companions, who soon put an end to the woman's life, or whatever she is. Meanwhile, the man who is watching Officer Hudson loses focus for a moment. Hudson takes advantage to finish him off. Hudson does not waste time and quickly calls for backup. The men try to communicate with their companion but get no reply, so Hudson goes to where they are and has a shootout, but soon decides to retreat to the aisles. While the man with the camera keeps an eye on the rest of the hostages, Ritter and Kane go after Hudson and end up finding the body of their dead companion. As Hudson walks through the aisles, he encounters Spooky, and without thinking twice, he shoots him. He analyzes the situation calmly, while Ritter and Kane hear the sound of the gunshot. Ritter soon reaches the aisle, and Hudson tells him not to move, but the man continues walking until Kane arrives from behind and finishes Hudson off. Kane finds the police officer's phone and sees that he managed to call for backup. Knowing this, he quickly informs the rest of the group. Ritter is taking care of Spooky, but he does not survive his wounds and soon passes away. Then Kane and Logan arrive with the hostages. Kane says they need to get out of there urgently, but Ritter insists on staying, as he does not want to give up whatever they are looking for and asks for more time, which Kane soon agrees to. Ritter informs Sterling that the police are coming and asks if she is still on board with the plan. She confirms and agrees to go ahead with the plan. Then Ritter says, Spooky, before he died, stated that the thing was there. Kane soon leads the hostages away, while Ritter takes Spooky's blood to leave a warning at the store's entrance, where he writes for no one to come close. Soon, the police arrive and release a portion of the already checked hostages. While Ritter asks Kane to detain those who haven't been checked yet, we see that Sterling is analyzing the body of the woman pointed out by Spooky, and states that the specimen is evolving into the 8th year of gestation. Ritter joins the rest of the group and says that the police are busy interrogating the hostages, then says they need to use Plan B. Outside, while a woman is being interrogated, Officer Steve arrives on the scene saying that his stepdaughter is inside and insists that they need to act quickly. Inside the market, the group seems divided over Ritter's decision to continue the mission. Kane questions how they will implement Plan B without a new identifier, and Ritter responds that they will need to find another one, but Sterling reminds that the police won't let anyone in. Ritter suggests that Charlotte take on the role, but Kane laughs and asks if he forgot what happened to Scott. The group then decides to apply some tests to the people, while Charlotte does not arrive at the scene. Sterling warns that it's dangerous, but Ritter retorts that Spooky guaranteed it was safe. Sterling tries to convince him that there are young people among the hostages, but Ritter expresses concern, stating that the thing cannot leave there. Sterling agrees and asks them to bring the necessary materials. Kane does not like the idea, so Logan offers to go get them. Ritter asks Sterling to check the bodies, as some of them may be infected, and asks Logan to record everything. He also orders Kane to turn off the market lights, and soon, everything is dark. Steve, seeing this, requests that the external floodlights be turned on so that the intruders cannot identify the position of the police. Inside the market, Logan carries Spooky's body to the cold chamber where the other bodies are, and as he exits, we see that the body of the dead police officer starts to convulse, and the lights flicker. They then initiate the first test, making the hostages drink a liter of milk, but one of the women cannot. Kane, growing impatient, demands that she finish and warns the manager that he will be the first to be tested. When Kane leaves the room, Lisa comments that, in the chamber where the dead are, they forgot the police officer's gun and that they can use it to try to get out alive. One of the men calls her stupid for wanting to do that, but she explains her reasons, saying that her stepfather is a police negotiator and that she has heard many reports of situations like this, asserting that those men didn't even consider making a negotiation. Meanwhile, outside, Steve and Officer Cooper investigate the van used by the suspects to get to the location. The two approach cautiously, and Steve decides to open the rear doors, finding inside a large quantity of high-caliber ammunition, organized weaponry, and several cassette tapes, all with the image of an unknown man's face. The discovery reinforces that the group is not involved with a simple kidnapping, but with something much larger and planned. Cooper then informs the negotiator that the van is registered in the name of Aaron Ritter, a 43-year-old man, widowed, with a clean record, who has worked for many years at JPL. Steve, intrigued, asks what JPL is, and Cooper replies that it is the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, an advanced research unit linked to space exploration. The mention of JPL raises even stranger suspicions about the kidnappers and their intentions. Steve shows urgency in establishing contact with Ritter by phone, but Cooper informs him that all cell signals have been blocked, so Steve orders them to find an alternative form of communication to try to negotiate before anything worse happens. Inside the market, the group returns to the hostages' room, and Ritter decides to formally introduce his team. Sterling, a doctor and biology specialist, Logan, who is in charge of records and equipment, and Kane, although he does not clearly reveal his role, seems to be the executor of the heavier actions. One of the older hostages, in a tone of desperation, pleads for the younger ones to be released, but Ritter refuses, saying that unfortunately, everyone there is at risk, and no one is above suspicion. He then starts to explain the reason for their presence in that location, revealing that they are after a carrier infected with an extremely dangerous substance, something they traced to Buck Lake. Ritter reveals that the only member of the group capable of identifying the infected, Spooky, was killed during the confrontation, and now they will have to resort to another riskier method to find out who was exposed. Manager Tarkey will be the first to undergo the new test. Ritter explains that the milk ingested alters the internal pH of the body, and that this should provoke a noticeable reaction in the hosts. He states that those who show no signs will be safely released. One of the hostages asks what happens if someone is infected, and Kane, coldly, replies that that person will die. They then take Tarkey to a separate room while Kane remains monitoring the others. Logan records the entire procedure, starting with Tarkey's name written on the lid of a container, documenting each step. Sterling enters and informs that she has already examined all the bodies taken to the cold chamber and discovered that all the corpses are fertile females, reinforcing the biological threat they are facing. Ritter interrogates Tarkey, asking if he is married, and the man replies that he is divorced. He then asks him to observe his own fingers and tell him if he sees a red stripe, which could indicate infection. Tarkey denies it, saying he sees nothing. The team begins to apply small mind games to distract him, while Sterling prepares to cut the manager's finger as part of the physical test. Upon seeing the knife, Tarkey panics, recoils, and presses himself against the wall in despair. In the hostages' room, everyone hears the commotion, and Kane decides to go check it out. Desperate, Tarkey tries to bargain by offering the money he had stolen from the register, but the group ignores the proposal and insists on continuing with the protocol. Meanwhile, in the escape plan, the older man says he will go get the gun forgotten in the cold chamber, as agreed with Lisa, but Manny pulls out a knife and says he will go himself. The man convinces him that he has more experience with firearms, and the four conspirators agree to the change. Lisa instructs that as soon as he opens fire, the others should attack the kidnappers from behind. In the room where the invaders are, the phone starts ringing unexpectedly. Ritter answers skeptically, and on the other end is Steve, who introduces himself as the police negotiator and tries to initiate a dialogue. He directly asks what the kidnappers want, but Ritter responds that even if he told him, he wouldn't believe it. Steve insists and asks Ritter to try to explain, stating that he has seen it all throughout his career and may not be surprised by the answer, but Ritter refuses to cooperate and says he is too busy for that kind of conversation. Steve then tries to touch on something more personal and mentions that Ritter is far from home, to which the man coldly replies that he goes where the job demands. Noticing an emotional gap, Steve asks if Ritter's daughter would be proud to know what he is doing, which clearly shakes him for a moment, but he soon regains control of the situation, ignores the provocation, and continues with the plan, asking the detective to bring Charlotte to him. Steve changes the subject and asks if anyone is injured inside the market, trying to obtain any information. But Ritter does not give importance to the question and merely states that Charlotte is held in a local police station for a drunkenness-related infraction. Steve insists on knowing about the hostages, but Ritter raises his voice and says that the longer they take, the more serious everything will get. Then Steve, realizing that he will not get clear answers, agrees to continue. In the market, they proceed with the plan, firmly holding manager Tarkey, and Sterling, without hesitation, cuts one of his fingers, causing screams that can be clearly heard from the room where the hostages are, which makes everyone even more tense. The severed finger is placed in a jar of ice, and after 2 minutes, Sterling confirms that there was no reaction, meaning he is clean. Logan observes disappointed and says he was sure Tarkey was the infected one. Outside, the police are watching recordings left by Dr. Sterling, in which she explains how these creatures operate and how they can be destroyed. She reveals that freezing them is the best way to prevent them from reproducing, and even shows an X-ray of a species that has already reached an advanced stage of evolution. Steve and Cooper watch attentively, and one of the two asks if she really said that it came from a meteor or some unidentified object, which raises even more doubts about the origin of the threat. Cooper then informs Steve that Charlotte is on her way and should arrive in about 20 minutes. He then shows the criminal record of Charlotte, containing minor offenses, and soon after presents the file of Aaron Ritter, revealing that he was fired from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory after being accused of involuntary manslaughter, although he was acquitted. Cooper adds that all other members linked to Ritter were also fired at the same time, and that, according to Ritter's father-in-law, the group regrouped strangely, as if they had formed some sort of club, buying weapons in large quantities and disappearing for months. Back in the market, Benny warns the teacher not to let the freezer door close completely, explaining that it can only be opened from the outside, and if someone gets trapped inside, they will not be able to get out. Soon after, they bring Tarkey back to the hostages' room, and everyone wants to know what they did to him. The manager responds that they cut off his finger, which shocks the others. Kane then chooses Lisa as the next to be tested, but she panics and says that her father is Detective Steve. Ritter appears and asks what the confusion is, and Kane replies that Lisa seems to have good connections. Ritter wants to know if Steve is really her father, and she responds that, in fact, he is just her stepfather. Even so, Ritter orders that the plan continue normally. Before Kane takes Lisa, Benny offers to go in her place, and the group agrees, taking the boy to the next phase of the test. Meanwhile, Charlotte is on her way to the market in a police car, apparently drunk, asking for her sunglasses. The officer drives calmly and asks why she and Ritter have problems, to which Charlotte replies that she messed everything up. The officer, confused, asks what exactly she messed up, and Charlotte starts to explain that she should have helped Ritter on a mission, but chose to keep using illicit things and abandoned him. She then asks the officer to take off the handcuffs, complaining that they are too tight, but he refuses, saying that they will soon be arriving. To distract her, he turns on the radio, but Charlotte begins to act strangely, restless, and with unexpected strength, manages to break free from the handcuffs, even with her wrists marked. Back in the market, the group begins the same process with Benny, who, frightened, asks if there is a correct answer that could prevent him from having his finger cut off. Ritter says he cannot reveal that, and then asks why the boy volunteered to go in the girl's place. Benny insists on knowing if there is anything he can do to prevent what is about to happen, but no one answers him. Ritter laments, and they cut off the boy's finger. The police examine tapes where people run in fear, trying to hide in a basement. In the room, Kane praises Benny for his courage. Soon, they hear a woman scream, and Sterling confirms that she is not the target either. Ritter asks how many are left, and she says 3. Sterling believes they will no longer need Charlotte as she always shows up when someone dies. Ritter says she is just an addict, but will be essential to capture the creature. He and Sterling argue, but Logan interrupts them when he notices that the woman's finger starts to regenerate. She lets out a terrifying scream, attacks the group with supernatural strength, and Ritter manages to kill her. Kane tries to communicate with the group, but getting no response decides to investigate. The hostages take advantage of the confusion to plan to get the gun from the dead officer. The teacher goes to the freezer, grabs the gun, but before returning to the group, he is attacked and killed. The sound of the shot startles everyone. Ritter tells Steve that Lisa is still alive but threatens that if Charlotte is not delivered, another person will die. Steve asks for 10 minutes. Logan reports that the Sentinel almost infected Sterling and says that the creature was different. They notice the professor's absence, and under pressure, Benny reveals that he went into the freezer. Kane and Logan investigate and find the professor's remains. Soon, the body of the police officer rises, and they confront him with gunfire. Outside, Charlotte arrives and hands over the handcuffs, surprising everyone with her abilities. Charlotte, talking to Steve, reveals that the aliens infect humans like a virus, making them violent and strong hosts. Ritter finds Kane, wounded, who says that the virus is in the police officer and believes he is the king. He confesses that he was infected and asks Ritter to kill him. Ritter accepts the request and finishes him off. Back in the market, Ritter tells Sterling that the king was the police officer. He says he is going to hunt the monster and asks her to take care of the hostages. Steve discovers that Charlotte has been infected and can now see the aliens. Ritter finds Logan's body and finishes him off, catching the monster's attention. The hostages attack Sterling and take her weapon. Manny celebrates the control but is thrown by the creature. Ritter tries to shoot and fails, and the creature devours Manny. Steve tries to enter, but Charlotte stops him. Ritter explains to Benny that if they want to survive, they need to trust them. Sterling shows that she also took the test, and Ritter only asks for 10 minutes. Steve demands Lisa's release, but Ritter proposes a trade, Charlotte for Lisa. Charlotte quickly checks Steve and confirms that he is clean. Ritter explains the plan, but before he finishes, he hears noises and hangs up. After that, Steve tells the police to prepare to enter. Charlotte tries to stop them, but is unsuccessful. Lisa still does not trust them, but Benny reminds her that she saw the creature. They decide to help. The group searches the market and finds a locked door. In the dark aisles, they find Manny's body. Ritter warns that they will have to exit through the main entrance. Suddenly, Sterling and Tarky see a shadow. Tarky thinks they are being cornered, but Ritter says that the creature just wants to kill. Steve sees flashlights and finds the slowness strange. The group follows, hears a roar, and Tarky knocks over the jar with his finger. When trying to retrieve it, he is brutally killed. Ritter sends everyone to the manager's office. Then he opens the entrance door and finds Steve, who demands to know where Lisa is. Ritter lies, saying she is dead, but then confesses she is alive and proposes a temporary alliance. Sterling reports that she shot the aberration 6 times. Soon the creature appears again, but flees when shot at multiple times. Lisa and Benny devise a plan. He offers to distract the creature, but the young woman refuses to leave him. Steve insists on getting Lisa before continuing. Ritter reveals where the office is and asks that when they exit, they let him finish the job. Steve finds the young people, and they all hug. Charlotte uses her powers to attract the king. When Steve and the young people are leaving, the police invade the place. Suddenly, the creature rushes in and violently attacks Ritter. Sterling grabs her gun, and Steve fires to get attention. Ritter takes advantage, stabs the creature, and tears it from the host. He asks for help, and all the police open fire, killing the monster, but also hitting Ritter. Being infected, he asks to be killed, and Sterling fulfills his last wish. Minutes later, Steve promises Sterling that if everything is proven, she will have freedom. Charlotte warns over the radio that that was not the king. Sterling believes it must be one of the boys. Benny and Lisa are in the police car. When Benny calls for the young woman, he notices that she is strange. When he tries to get out, he realizes he is locked in. He points the gun, and she says she will always love him. Then only Benny's screams are heard.